Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Prasthaya Namaste Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Om Agyanatmanandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshi Samaritan Jena Tasmai Sri Guru Namah Vayam Rupa Kadavayam Dadati Sa Pandatikam Manchakalpatruvascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Do you hear them?
Yes.
You know what they are?
Sorry?
Do you know what they are?
What is?
You couldn't hear them. Did you hear them? What are they?
So I don't know the name of the bird, but it's some bird. Peacock?
No, not peacock. The black cockatoos. They're they're rowdy birds. One thing I've seen about the birds, because there's so many birds around here, because there's water over there, is that even a big bird, even the bigger ones, when little ones chase them from behind, they become frightened and run away. I mean, fly away. They don't run away. Yeah. So, and there's always competition amongst the different species of birds. And when there's no other species of birds to fight, they fight with themselves. So this is the very nature of material existence. And also I've seen that the magpies, one will fly down into the paddock, into the yard, and he'll start calling, and then a few more will come. So they like to associate with each other. I also noted that. So what can we learn from that? There's that English saying. Anyone know the English saying?
Birds of a feather flock together.
Birds of a feather flock together. That means one likes to hang around, associate with, or flock with creatures of a similar nature. So what is the spiritual aphorism about this, that important to associate with devotees? But what happens if you find that you prefer to associate with those who like footy instead? Then it indicates something about our nature. So everyone can examine who they like to associate with in a private way, in a closed door, in a closed room, and and then there's some people who are so sick of associating with other people, they'd rather be alone, go on top of a mountain somewhere. And there's all kinds. But what is the best kind of association? That's what we're reading about with Madhavendra Puri, because Madhavendra Puri, he went into the Gopinath's temple in Ramuna, and he desired he heard about the wonderful kheer, the wonderful sweet rice that was offered to Gopinath, and he thought, oh, my Gopal would really like to have this. So while the food was being offered, he thought that, I wonder what it tastes like. And just because of that one thought, he thought himself, this is improper. I've desired to taste something that hasn't been offered to the Lord. Before he's eaten it and enjoyed it, I want to enjoy, which is the main characteristic of a conditioned soul. He thinks himself central, and the central enjoyer, and by the influence of Maya, whatever he looks at, he sees it either his mind will either accept it, sankalpa, vikalpa, accept it or reject it based on whether or not he thinks this is going to give me pleasure. So this is just the very nature of a conditioned soul. This is the nature of false ego, to think like this, to keep oneself in the center. And the nature of real ego, our real nature, is to have Krishna in the center. So if we're not just talking philosophy, and we think from now on I'm going to put Krishna in the center, we can say that, but as soon as we try to do it, we find that we're not able to do it, and we tend to go back into the usual way of thinking. And why? Is because we don't have that kind of relationship with Krishna, and we become fearful. We become fearful when we think of putting Krishna in the center and doing everything for Krishna, because why? What does the conditioned soul naturally think when he thinks? What emotion comes to his mind? I already said it, but what emotion comes?
Fear.
Fear. Bhayam dvitiya abhinaveshita syad. Fear comes immediately along with having false ego. Why are we afraid? Is because false ego puts us in the illusion that we're in the center. But guess what? We can't convince anyone else we're in the center. So therefore, we can't even convince the magpies in the paddock that we're in the center. We can't convince anyone that we're in the center. So therefore, we're afraid, because according to my estimation, the universe should cooperate with all my desires. And the universe doesn't cooperate with our desires, and it doesn't, and it's very efficient in the way it chews up and digests everything that exists. This was what Arjuna saw by the grace of Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He saw that the great universal form was devouring everything, and even the soldiers were entering into this mouth of this and he was chewing them. And that's what happens to everything in material existence over time. Because that's what Krishna said, Kalosmin lokachaya kreta, in time. This is time. This is the unstoppable force of time. So the great challenge of life is to remove false ego and not exist, and get some relief from thinking that the pains of material existence won't touch me, but rather to develop trust in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's what we're hearing now. How Madhavendra Puri thought in that way, in such a humble, devotional way, and he just left. But Krishna, the nature of Krishna, and this is why we hear these things, and this is why we follow the processes of Krishna consciousness. The nature of Krishna is he so much loves his devotees, and he promises that they will know. He has Arjuna promise, Kautya pratita lalihi name bhakta punashati, that my devotee will not perish, that he will take care of us. He will take care of us. And therefore he could take care of us better than we could take care of ourselves. So therefore, if we actually have that kind of relationship with Krishna, if we do our part in that relationship with Krishna, and we experience him in his doing his part, in taking care of us or whatever, or reciprocating in whatever way he does, then, and usually we think first he should do his part, make sure that I understand, and then I'll do my part. And he says, no, first you do your part. But actually he's always doing his part. What do I mean by that, Braj Mohan? How is he taking care of us? Continuously.
water and oxygen and food.
And what else? What else?
Independence.
He's providing us independence.
Intelligence.
Huh?
Intelligence.
Intelligence. What else is he providing us? The blood is circulating, the breathing. Just imagine if you had to remember to breathe and suddenly your mind was distracted. Your mind got involved in something else and you forgot to breathe. And your blood is circulating, the food is digesting, just the simplest things on that level. And when one looks at the complexities of the body, it's incredible. Just even how a foot works, or the relationship between the muscular system and the skeletal system, which is protecting the digestive system and the oxygenating system, the breath. It's actually, even how one cell works in the body, or how the RNA and DNA, how they work, because the DNA can't reproduce. The genetic, it needs another element, the RNA to reproduce or to carry it's staggering. It's staggering if one looks at anything in detail. So Krishna is taking care of us, and he's giving us facilities. And just as the Swatasvatara Upanishad explains, he's just waiting like a second bird in the tree, where the first bird and the second bird is just waiting for us to turn to him. So the great turning of the soul towards Krishna is called Sharanagati, or surrender, or the giving of oneself to Krishna. And that is life's goal. And to do that, because Sharanagati we usually translate it as surrender, but it can't really be done as we usually think about surrender, and usually we think this is surrender, and you go, yes, Prabhu. Yes. Or else, if you don't love me, I'm going to shoot you. That doesn't work very well. If you don't trust me, I'm going to shoot you. If you don't put yourself in my head, yes, Prabhu, yes, Prabhu, yes, Prabhu. It doesn't really work in that way. But what works is that if we develop either quickly or slowly a relationship with Krishna. So here, Madhavendra Puri, we're just watching this incredible relationship that he has with a deity. Deity, of course, in Latin is a Latin word that means God. Dios means God. So he has such a relationship with God in the form of this deity that he actually hides the sweet rice, so that Madhavendra Puri, who desired to taste it, will have his desire fulfilled. And when the Pujari dreams in this way, that then how is Madhavendra Puri going to know? So then he appears in the Pujari's dream. So not only did he appear to Madhavendra Puri, but to fulfill his desire to give Madhavendra Puri what Madhavendra Puri desired, he comes in the Pujari's dream, because the Pujari is worshipping Gopinath with such affection and devotion that, as Prabhupada says in one purport, he's practically speaking on the same level as Madhavendra Puri, because he's when he cooks the sweet rice, when he offers it, he's offering it for the his pleasure. He's doing his part in the relationship. So just consider what's going to happen, and it's already started. He's following the order of Gopinath in the dream. He goes to the Pujari goes to the marketplace and calls out Madhavendra Puri. He doesn't know who Madhavendra Puri is or where he is, but in the dream he's told. And then, so he brings that sweet rice to give to him, and now he says, take this pot of sweet rice. Gopinath has stolen this pot of sweet rice for you. Would the sannyasi whose name is Madhavendra Puri please come and take this pot of sweet rice and enjoy the prasadam with great happiness? Because not only is it, look what the deity has done just for him. Has that ever happened to you when someone does something extraordinary just for you? Just for your pleasure? What happens when you understand that Krishna has done this just for you? And even a little thing like giving sweet rice is the greatest thing because he has done this just for me. You are the most fortunate person within these three worlds. Take this pot of sweet rice and enjoy the prasadam with great happiness. Now, why is he the most fortunate person? Why do you think?
Krishna's personally fulfilling his desire.
He's reciprocated with him. That he's done something just for him. And why would the Supreme Lord do that? Out of his affection. So this is fortune. When we awaken, our consciousness awakens to Krishna and awake in our loving relationship with him. So Madhavendra Puri's devotion was so great that it evoked Krishna's devotion in such Gopinath's devotion in such a strong way. Now here's a question for you. What do you think the Pujari was thinking? He doesn't do this for me. How come he gets all the mercy? He's never stolen anything from me. What do you think? Was the Pujari thinking like that?
I don't think he thought like that. He was very happy, in fact.
That's amazing, yes. What would it be called if he did think like that?
Envious.
Yeah. Of course, none of us would ever think like that, would we? But sometimes maybe there's a little part of us, there's a little voice inside sometimes does think a little bit like that, maybe sometimes. And of course we immediately say, shut up. I don't want to hear this nonsense. Because that's what it means to be a good person. You rejoice in someone when someone gets benefited. And in his Prem Bhakti Chandrika, Srila Narottama Das Thakur said, he talks about envy, he compares envy to like being a spear in the heart. Because say if the Pujari did think like that, why does he get this? I should get it. So that would mean, if we generalize that would mean that when something good happens to someone, we become envious and we feel angry. So just imagine, and that's so painful, so just imagine how one's life would be filled with pain if every time we see something good happening to someone, it gives us pain. So Narottama, how much suffering is there in that? A lot. Continuous suffering, more or less, and not wanting anything good to happen to anyone but me. So that's, if someone is in that mood, you'd say they're envious, but what would you also call them? No, I thought of a political statement to make, but I decided it wouldn't be appropriate. What would you call a person who thought that nothing good should happen to anyone but me? Selfish. Perhaps you'd call him a little bit selfish. What else would you call him?
Narcissist.
Yeah, I would call him crazy. Could you imagine? What would you do if there was a person who was thinking like that? What would you want to do with him? You want to lock him up as quickly as you could? Probably, at least I would. Of course, in a nice cell, we wouldn't want any harm. But it would be dangerous. And there are people who are so much suffering in their life that they can't tolerate anyone, any happiness in another. So it's very, 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 very unfortunate as opposed to fortunate. Because there's this one prayer by Prahlad Maharaj in the 5th canto where he talks about swasti. He's just wishing good fortune for every living entity. For every living entity, that's devotee's consciousness. He's wishing good fortune for everyone. How wonderful that is. And how rare that quality of a devotee is. So, you are the most fortunate person within these 3 worlds, said the Pujari. And I'll read some of Prabhupada's purport here. And then the next verse, Madhavendra Puri is going to step forward. Purport. Here is an example of a personal benediction by Krishna's immoral activity. Because the point that Prabhupada has been making in his purports up to this point is Krishna has stolen, and we say stealing is bad. But whatever Krishna does is never bad. Everything he does is good. This is the meaning of him being the Param Satyam, the absolute truth, the absolute good. Everything that he does is good and transcendental and spiritual and beyond the good and bad of this world. So Prabhupada, the line that Prabhupada is important line of thinking that Prabhupada is explaining is that when Krishna does something that would be considered bad or immoral for us, like stealing, when Krishna steals butter or everything, it's all on the transcendental platform. And the point that he ultimately made and will continue to make is that when Krishna dances with the wives of the gopis in the middle of the night, that might be considered inappropriate in times long past. But it's on a completely different level when Krishna does it. This is the level of absolute good. It's the level of the highest purity. It's not in the land of the reflection. It's in the land of the absolute. And it is practically speaking, actually speaking, impossible for us to understand what that land is like and what the dealings are like there. It's of a different substance, of a completely different nature. But it's so wonderful that someone like Madhavendra Puri, to live in that land, he was getting so much pleasure from life in the land of the transcendental that he didn't have any cares for eating or sleeping or defense or he was just wishing good for everyone and wanting to serve and others' happiness. He was getting so much pleasure from that platform that this platform, where the platform of reflection, where we tend to want to get our pleasure from, was so insignificant. Tuchavat is the word used to describe the renunciation of the Goswamis. Tuchavat, renounce things, but it wasn't, I have to give this up. I have to give this up. I wish I didn't have to, but I have to give it up. No. Tuchavat means insignificant. So for that, one has to be on a higher level, the level of param drisvanavartate, tasting the sweetness of the transcendental level. So therefore, if one is eating the real mango, then the attempt to eat the reflected mango in the mirror one wouldn't bother. So Prabhupada continues. Thus, even the Lord's criminal activities make his devotees the most fortunate person. How could a mundane rascal understand the pastimes of Krishna and judge whether he is moral or immoral? So Prabhupada is speaking about a tendency to those who know of Krishna's pastimes but have no idea know of them on the most superficial level, but have no understanding of the transcendental nature of it, and they will say, and I've heard that, I probably mentioned this a few classes ago, then when I was in Bangladesh and Dhaka one time, some Christian gentleman came to me and said, how could you worship a God who dances with the wives of others in the middle of the night? I should have said, just like you would like to do. but it wasn't appropriate. But how could a person judge the transcendental level from simply one's experiences on the material level? And that reminds us of the little story of Dr. Frog. You know the story of Dr. Frog? Would you please now tell it in brief?
Okay. So there was a frog who lived in a well, and
how big was the well? Say.
Yeah, it was a small well, but he didn't really know any other place but that well. And one day another frog came and he was talking to him, he was telling him about the ocean. And so the frog in the well, he couldn't understand something being so big, so he tried to measure it like, is it as big as half my well, is it as big as my well, maybe 3 wells. But because all he knew was the well, and it's impossible for him to understand the vastness of the ocean.
Yeah, thank you. So that little story is to instruct us that we can't really understand the spiritual transcendental realm from our material perspective, because all we have is material limited concepts. So is the happiness of the spiritual world 2 times more than the happiness I have here? Is it 3 times more than? Is it 4 times? You mean it's 10 times more? You mean it's not 10? You mean it's 11 times more? So, well, how many times do you have to multiply material to get to the spiritual? Just different realms. It doesn't work like that. So how do we know that the spiritual realm really exists if it's inconceivable?
We have a tendency to seek for that level of happiness and bliss.
But how do you know it exists?
Shastra, Prabhupada.
Yeah. Shastra, Prabhupada, great devotees. Devotees like Rupa Goswami. What Prabhupada did was actually impossible, but you could see that someone like Rupa Goswami or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they were historical figures. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was historically famous as being one of the greatest scholars, and he just gave it up and became a devotee. Rupa Goswami, from being the prime minister, one of the main ministers of Nawab Hussain Shah, who was a historical figure, he preferred to live as a mendicant under one tree after the next, begging for his food. There's a little story of Raghunath Das Goswami, his family was so wealthy, and he was by Radhakund, very, very thin, and crying in separation from Krishna. And some person came to him and said, "Oh, you're crying?" "Yes." "You're so thin. If I give you some food, will that help you?" Thinking that's why he's crying. And his reply was, "No. Why don't you go home again? There you'll get food." And he said, "No, something to the effect of, I prefer to be on the banks of Radhakund crying, because in that intense desire, Krishna is actually present." And how could a materialistic person understand these things? So that's what Prabhupada says here, basically. And what did he call him? How could a mundane rascal understand the pastimes of Krishna and judge whether he is moral and immoral? Prabhupada liked to call people rascals, it seems. And then he said, "I'm not saying, it was Krishna who was saying." Since Krishna is the absolute truth, there is no mundane distinction such as moral and immoral. Whatever he does is good. And that is the real meaning of God is good. He is good in all circumstances because he is transcendental, outside the jurisdiction of this material world. Therefore, Krishna can be understood only by those who are already living in the spiritual world. So what a challenge that is. He can really be understood, actually understood, by only someone who's already living in the spiritual world. And therefore, we get most accurate knowledge about Krishna, not by our speculation, but by hearing from those who are already living in the spiritual world. Then, after calling out, the Pujari called out, "Oh, Madhavendra Puri, you're the most fortunate. Please come, Gopinath has stolen this for you." Then, Ita Shuni Puri Gosai Parichai Dila. So, hearing this invitation, Madhavendra Puri came out and identified himself. The priest then delivered the pot of sweet rice and offered his obeisances. He fell down before him because he understood this person is so exalted that Gopinath personally did the sweet rice for him, and then he informed me, and he was exactly where Madhavendra Puri, where Gopinath told him he was. So quite amazing. And when the story about the pot of sweet rice was explained to him in detail, Sri Madhavendra Puri, what do you think? How do you think he felt? How do you think he felt?
He felt love.
Yeah.
Connected.
Yeah. It is Shuni Prema Vishta. Prema Vish. Prema Mai. He became completely filled with love that my Lord has done this for me. For me, and he was thinking, I'm so offensive. I was thinking of enjoying the sweet rice, and look what he's done for me. He's so wonderful. And he just became absorbed. Prema Vishta. Prema Vishta. Prabhupada translated as Avishta, means saturated with love of God. The love of God was completely within him, like that. So he became absorbed in it. Absorbed in ecstatic love of Krishna. Upon seeing the ecstatic, so remember this is an exchange. There's three people in this exchange. There's Madhavendra Puri, there's the Pujari, and then there's Gopinath. So the Pujari is being used by Gopinath to serve his other devotee. One devotee is being used by Gopinath to serve the other devotee, Madhavendra Puri. And upon seeing the ecstatic loving symptoms manifest in Sri Madhavendra Puri, the priest, the pujari, was struck with wonder. Now listen to this. He could understand. This is what he understood when he saw the ecstatic absorption of Madhavendra Puri. He understood why Krishna had become so much obliged to him. And he saw that Krishna's action was befitting. Befitting means appropriate. Now, what do you think of that? What do you think of that?
He got a confirmation.
Saved. For the moment. Yes, Krishna.
He probably knew that there was going to be that there was a nice interaction, but he got it confirmed when he saw Madhavendra Puri actually display those symptoms, and knew that he was very appreciative.
Yeah. What do you think? Anyone else like to comment?
Because of love of Madhavendra Puri, Krishna reciprocated.
Yeah. So herein is something for us, and the pujari thought it was appropriate. This is the nature of the loving dealings between the Lord and his devotees. And naturally, although we feel ourselves perhaps very unqualified in not having that love, wouldn't it be wonderful to have that kind of love that evokes that kind of love from that kind of person, like Krishna? And that desire, that wouldn't it be wonderful, is our wealth. Because our life is filled with so many desires. We have desires that are reactions from past lives, thousands of lives ago maybe. Sometimes we have desires that are based on things that happened to us in this life, early in this life, which were caused by things in previous lives or whatever. We're filled with desires, and according to the desires that we have, we wander birth after birth in the material existence. This is described in the beginning of the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But when this desire enters our heart, because our desires place us either quickly or gradually, quickly or slowly, gradually, they lead us to our next places. So this is what we want to do. We want to get the seed of desire. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Krishna would steal some sweet rice from me? No, not quite like that. But if I could have the kind of love that is so selfless, that is so exalted, that is so pure, that is so intense, that it would capture Krishna. The emphasis obviously isn't on capturing Krishna, but it's on pleasing this kind of a person, this supreme person, who after all is a person. Now, let's read Prabhupada's purport here. A devotee can bring Krishna perfectly under his control. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.3. Aljito jito pyasitas trilokyam. Krishna is never conquered by anyone, but a devotee can conquer him through devotional service. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Vedeshu Dolabham Atma Bhakta. One cannot understand Krishna simply by reading the Vedic literature. Although all Vedic literature is meant for understanding Krishna, one cannot understand Krishna without being a lover of Krishna. Therefore, along with the reading of Vedic literature, Swadhyaya, one must engage in devotional worship of the deity, the Archa Vidhi. One must follow Archana Vidhi. So, why isn't it emphasized here that one must engage in devotional worship? Because one would think that Prabhupada would say of the Supreme Lord or of Krishna, but he said of the deity, because this is an instruction for us who are not on that level, because how could we worship the Supreme Lord? And the answer is, the deity is there. The Archa Vigraha is there. And that is the purpose of having temples, and is that we make our devotional offerings, not mechanically, but with devotion we offer. And the point of this pastime is that look how the deity can reciprocate. He's not made out of stone or wood or whatever. He is made out of that, but he's more than that. He's Krishna. So it's not a loss that we're not qualified to be here, but we're qualified to be here, and let's do it properly with devotion, and the full reciprocation of Krishna can be there through the deity. One must engage in devotional worship of the deity, Archana Vidhi, together. Means the reading of the Vedic literature and the worship of the deity. Together, these will enhance the devotee's transcendental understanding of devotional service. So why, if you just read the literature, but then you have to practice, put into practice what you hear. So here's what you read. So here is such a good way to put it into practice, what we read, that we perform, we can serve the deity. And why shouldn't we just serve the deity and why shouldn't we just serve the deity and no need to read? Is because then we won't have the proper understanding of who the deity is. So the two go together, hand in hand. So therefore Prabhupada concludes, Shravanadi Shuddhachitte Karide Karaye Uday, that this is the way that love of God is evoked. He continues, love of Godhead is dormant within everyone's heart. And if one simply follows the standard process of devotional service, it is awakened. And then Prabhupada goes back to this point. But foolish, mundane people who simply read about Krishna mistakenly think that he is immoral or criminal. So the priest offered his obeisances to Madhavendra Puri, and he returned to the temple. Then, in ecstasy, Madhavendra Puri ate the sweet rice offered to him by Krishna. The devotee offers Krishna, and Krishna offers the devotee. And after this, Madhavendra Puri washed the pot and broke it into pieces. He then bound all the pieces in his outer cloth and kept them nicely. And each day, Madhavendra Puri would eat one piece of that earthen pot. And after eating it, he would immediately be overwhelmed with ecstasy. These, Adbhuta Katana, these are wonderful pastimes, wonderful stories. Adbhuta, wonderful, Kata. These are wonderful. They fill one with wonder. Having broken the pot and bound the piece in his cloth, Madhavendra Puri began to think, the Lord has given me a pot of sweet rice, and when the people hear of this tomorrow morning, there will be great crowds. And then, if it was nowadays, there were great crowds there come, and Madhavendra Puri were there, and everyone would say, take a selfie, can I take a selfie with you? You wouldn't do that, would you? No. Thinking this, Sri Madhavendra Puri offered his obeisances to Gopinath on the spot, even though Gopinath wasn't there, but he was there because of his internal remembrance, and he left Ramuna before morning. And he was going to Puri to fulfill the request of Gopinath, of Gopal. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Questions or comments? What do you think of this Adbhuta Katha? What do you think? You think it's wonderful?
It reminded me of, I read in the 7th canto, when Naramuni explains to, I think, Yudhishthira Maharaj, that one must consider the form of Krishna, and the ways are, for example, Kansa out of his fear, Shishupal out of his envy, the Gopis out of their lust of desires, and the Yadavas by their familial relationship, the Pandavas out of their affection, and with the general devotees out of our devotion for Krishna. And when I read the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Gopis' desires for Krishna are not, they're of a different quality. So like say there's gold and there's iron, they're both metal, but they're different in quality. And I still didn't understand at the time, but then I realized how, for example, let's say there's pure gold and there's cheap iron, so one's pure and one's cheap. And then relate that to relationships. So like there's the mother and baby, so although relationships in this world are based on lust, that can be perceived as a more pure type of lust, and then there's a billionaire politician and his supermodel trophy wife, so that love is like a cheap love.
I thought you said it reminded you of the deity.
Oh.
We didn't get there yet, did we?
Oh,
okay, yeah. We'll save that for part 2. Okay. You should preach. You like to talk about Krishna, yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
My question is about this envious and selfishness you were talking about, especially in this environment. Especially I'm talking about myself. That the moment I step my feet outside our home, I'm automatically in that situation where at work you have to beat the targets, you have to beat other companies, or wherever you go, that culture is engraved into our my lifestyle more. So how to protect your mentality, because it just continuously keeps on coming and coming. And the other point is that they pay bonuses for you for that if you do that.
The more envious and aggressive and nasty you become and crush the opposition, the more rewards you get.
They pay you bonuses for that, yes.
And the more karma you get too. The more entangled you get. Well, that's the nature of the material world, isn't it? It's entangling.
Yeah.
So how to protect yourself?
Yeah.
Well, there's the standard. If you have a strong morning program and you have a taste on a different level, if you get some taste on a different level, so even though you may be in that world and dealing with it, you don't fully give yourself to it and believe the dream is reality, because you've tasted something different. If you have no higher taste at all, then of course you get you'll be more entangled. And then there's the point of understanding philosophically that the more that you are in that passionate mode and ignorant mode, the more you suffer. It doesn't bring peace, it doesn't bring happiness, it causes more and more anxiety. So you can be introspective and reflective, and you really, even though there's a part of you may desire on that level, but not the deepest part. If the deepest part of you desires on that level, then you're in more trouble, deeper trouble. And then there's, of course, the question is how to use that in Krishna's service, that tendency. So in the old days, we'd just put you out on book distribution. and have all the people who go with you, you compete with them, but wish them well, but try to do better than them. Another way is you're working, so you have to give some of the fruits of your work to Krishna, because you want to end the duality, the divided mind. We spoke about this before. We have a divided mind, but a divided mind that wants to love Krishna, but it's so entangled in the material world, is better than having a singular mind only wants to exploit the material world. So a divided mind is better, but better than that. But you want to figure out how to use this in the service of that, how to use the material in the service of the spiritual. So that is a meditation. How could I use this in Krishna's service? You're developing skills. So how to use those skills in Krishna's service? And there's financial remuneration that you get. So how to use that in Krishna's service? And then there's the people who you come in contact with, and how to somehow benefit them. So to try to get rid of the division on the positive side, as opposed to becoming more and more materialistic. So it's a real meditation. So it's easy for me, who doesn't deal as much on that level, to give great advice. But if you talk to devotees who deal in the world, and they can maybe give you some of the tips of how they do it. That's a good sangha, the devotees who are dealing in the world, and just you ask them, you bring that question, how do they deal with that? Like that morning program, all the things that we mentioned, good rounds, hearing, association with devotees, and all the other things. But it's not easy. So therefore, in the Vedic culture, there was a cutoff time. That I'm not going to live my life to my last breath in that world. I don't want to do that. Good question. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Yeah, Krishna Lila, did you want to?
Right, it's a question a little bit about deity worship. You were saying that we're talking about the Archana Vidhi, and we know also that the sadhana for this Kali Yuga, for this age, is mostly through Nam Sankirtan. So how do we see the bigger picture with the deity worship, and how do we balance that?
We need deity worship to practically apply the principles that we learn. So, and Rupa Goswami explains that there's 5 most potent items of devotional service. Nam Sankirtan is one, association of devotees, Mathura Vrindavan Vas, Srimad Bhagavatam Shravan, and worshipping the deity with faith. So that's included as well. The Pancharatriki Vidhi, the worship of the deity, is also very important, because it gives us something that we can practically do with devotion.
So it's to support the Nam Sankirtan, or the other way around?
They both work together. But everything is done, all the other processes are done in conjunction, along with Nam Sankirtan. And also in the association of devotees. But Nam Sankirtan is essential, the holy name's essential and central. And if one is interested in only worshipping the deity, then and not respecting the devotees, for example, then that's called bhakta praya, almost like a devotee. So there must be all the items.
Thank you, Guru. On the topic of envy, there's a clear distinction between envy on the material world and transcendental envy for Krishna service.
What do you mean by transcendental envy for Krishna service?
Like transcendental competition in the spiritual world to serve Krishna. But I guess my question comes where Srimati Vrinda Devi was cursed because she was having such nice pastimes with Krishna, and it seems like that was from a point of envy that's similar to what
Bhagavatam's version is on a higher level than Gopal Tapani. Where is that from?
There's a Prabhu, I forget his name right now.
Is it Gopal Tapani, Dr. Trini?
Sorry?
Oh, you're not there. Okay.
Sorry?
Never. Where's this Vrinda Devi and the cursing and Sudama and all, and the becoming of Shalagam Shila? Where is that
My
from?
understanding is it's a Puranic story and it doesn't follow in the line of
It's
Rupa Goswami's.
no, it's on a lower level.
Wow.
Like there's differences between the Mahabharata.
On the same level.
There's explanations of the Mahabharata of things too that are different from Bhagavatam, but the Bhagavatam is the full, but it's in one of the Puranas. I think or it could be in Gopal Tapani, Upanishad, or I can't remember where it's from, or somewhere. But it's not considered as high as the level that the Bhagavatam explains.
Wow. That's interesting.
It's very interesting.
The version I heard was like published quite a lot, and maybe that's a problem, I think.
This is a problem.
Yeah, because I was quite convinced by that.
At least it's not your problem.
At least not now.
May I ask what the Bhagavatam version is for
Of what? Which?
that pastime of how Vrinda Devi?
It's not mentioned in the Bhagavatam.
Okay.
And also when things happen in the spirit, on the spiritual level, we will tend to ascribe emotions that we're familiar with on our level to that. Like there was, like the devotees, the cowherd boys will be running towards Krishna and a hum purvan, I want to be first, I want to be first. But they weren't tripping each other and kicking each other when they were down like an Aussie football match. Because the difference between envy and transcendental competition is you appreciate the other person's doing so well and so wonderful, but let me try to serve Krishna more. That's what Prabhupada said. So the envy means, you know that story, I'll end with this little story, is this one man, he was very envious of his neighbor. It's an old Sufi story or something like that. You know it?
No.
So he had a neighbor, and he got and he was poor, and his neighbor had more than him. So he got a benediction from something or other, some spirit of some sort, that he could have whatever he wanted, he would get. He had 3 wishes. You know the story, Braj Mohan? But don't tell it. I want to tell it.
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. Okay. So the man, and he was so happy to get this benediction. But then there was a second part, that whatever he got, his neighbor would get twice as much. So, and he was envious of his neighbor. So first thing he said is, I want a five-story house to live in with a swimming pool. And suddenly, boom, he had a 5-story house with a swimming pool. But then he looked out his window, and his neighbor had a 10-story house with 2 swimming pools. And he said, and he couldn't get any happiness, because when there's envy, you can't have happiness. So he had 2 more wishes. So then he said, I want my whole backyard filled with gold. And pop, his whole backyard was filled with gold. But then he looked out the window and he saw his neighbor's backyard was filled with gold that was twice as high. So he couldn't get any happiness and felt just gave him pain. So then he thought and thought and thought with his last wish, and he said, "Please take out one of my eyes." That's envy. That's a good story, a funny story with a terrible ending, but instructive. Usually we want, so there must be a happy ending to that, but I don't know it. Yeah, don't be like that. That's the happy ending, the instruction, because, yeah, so much suffering is there. He was willing to suffer this much as long as his neighbor suffered twice as much. Okay, so someone should say something sweet, because everything should end with a sweet. That wasn't quite sweet. We'll have to ask a Gujarati for something sweet. We have Punjabis, no, we'll get ghee. Okay, some from the Gujaratis, some sweet about Krishna.
Well, sweet rice that was stolen by Gopinath must be very, very, very sweet.
It must be very, very sweet.
And very special.
Very special, thank you. Yes, wonderful.
I heard about a thief
What?
who went to a Bhagavatam class and he
What?
heard about Krishna. And he heard how he was covered in jewels. He wore so many jewels. And the thief thought, if I could go to that place, I could steal his jewels. And somehow or other he got to go there. And he went to Vrindavan. And he approached Krishna, and Krishna was with his friends. And he said, can I steal those jewels? And Krishna said, oh no. He said, my mother would be so angry with me. And Prabhupada says, just by seeing Krishna like that, his heart completely changed. And he didn't want the jewels anymore. He was completely happy because he saw Krishna.
How wonderful. Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.